Hello. I've been traveling a lot since I became the CEO of GitHub about 18 months ago, and I joined GitHub about over 5 years ago. And it's been always clear since I started meeting with customers that every company is now becoming a software company. And it doesn't really matter, what company you are. Or there's the obvious ones, right? Or our smartphones are all software. Our computers are all software. We collaborate with software. Imagine the pandemic without software. But it's also traditional bank, agriculture here in Argentina. It's supermarkets in the Netherlands. It's really any company that is now building software. At the same time, building software has become even more complicated than ever. You have to not only build your software fast, you have to build it secure, you have to build it compliant with all kinds of regulations. And of course, you have to build and implement all the ideas that you have in your head. And so we realized, at GitHub that we need a new developer experience, one that makes developers actually happy. And I believe that the new developer experience will be defined by artificial intelligence, because AI will take the load off our shoulders, the load that has been created by all kinds of processes like DevOps, continuous integration, continuous deployment, or, just when you're on call every night. And ultimately, it is all about using the time during your day when you're most creative. For me, this is when I wake up in the morning, I pour a cup of coffee. That's when I'm most creative. That's when I want to build this big light bulb idea that I have. So that's why we built GitHub Copilot. If you haven't seen GitHub Copilot, it is your AI pair programmer. It sits in your editor, and whenever you type in the editor main window, a command, a comment, really any part of the code, it will auto-suggest not only the next word, but whole methods, boilerplate code, whole unit tests, and complex algorithms. Let's see a demo.
Let's see how Copilot can make me a more productive developer. I'm using Django Python, which, like most programming languages and frameworks, is supported by Copilot. Django is a framework for creating line-of-business applications, and the first step is to create my model classes, which is typically tedious. What I'm going to do instead is describe, using natural language, what I need my model to look like. That gray italicized text is Copilot generating the appropriate code. It creates the class definition and the full class across multiple lines of code. Copilot is also context aware. It saw the fact that I created a speaker class, and once again goes, well, speakers need to do something, and it generates a talk class for me. That entire class, all of those lines of code, was generated for me automatically by Copilot. There was one thing I didn't necessarily want here, which is it's allowing for speakers and talks all to be deleted. I want to modify that, so I go back to Copilot, ask it for a new suggestion, and it generates one. Finally, I want to add on a code for the talk which matches a particular pattern. Normally at this point, I would go running off to Stack Overflow to look up how to write this regular expression. Instead, I describe in natural language what that pattern is supposed to look like, and Copilot generates all of the appropriate code for me. This allows me to stay in the zone and focus in on the more important aspects of writing code.
So you saw the demo here, and I think one of the coolest things about Copilot is that it lets you stay in the zone. It lets you stay in the flow. It no longer requires you to move from your editor to the browser. And I don't know about you, but my browser always has 20 tabs open, with the last thing, the document I need to read, the shoes I wanted to order, the vacation I'm planning. On the new tab, there's all the world news. And then I, search for the question I have in Stack Overflow or on GitHub, and I might find the solution, but I might also get, as a good developer, get into an argument with other developers right after I saw the solution. And 20 minutes later, I'm back in my editor and I completely lost the flow. I no longer remember what I was working on. I might have the solution in the pasteboard, but I certainly am no longer focused on what I was working on. Copilot fixes that issue, and you can see here a number of statistics on the slide. And the first one I want to talk about is the one on the right side, the 46%. This is the number that we see in our telemetry in those files where Copilot is enabled. 46% of the code is written by the AI. That's almost half the code written by artificial intelligence. In fact, for Java, that number is over 60%. On the left side, you see 55%, and this is from a case study that we did with 100 developers. Half got Copilot and the other half didn't get Copilot. The group that got Copilot, everybody had to solve a programming issue, building a web server, and the group that had Copilot available to them was 55% faster. But not only that, they actually had a higher success rate. The group with Copilot was faster and more successful. And then in the middle, you see how developers felt about using Copilot. This is from a survey that we did with 2,000 developers. 75% of the survey respondents told us that they're more fulfilled, more happy, that they actually require less mental load when solving tasks. And you know, if you are anything like my developers, they don't like it when we touch their system. Now, Copilot is actually almost 3 years old. We started working on it in August of the year 2020. So last March 2023, we announced 5 new features for Copilot, and we're calling this next generation Copilot X. And you can see on the slide the 5 features: chat, voice, documentation, pull requests, that's the feature in GitHub, and the CLI, the command line interface. And if you have seen ChatGPT, you already have an idea how chat works, but we still want to show you a demo.
Copilot is great for giving you code suggestions in line as you type, but there was no way to easily ask questions or provide additional context until now. Copilot Chat lets you have a much richer pair programming experience right in Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code. It can suggest tasks based on your code. For example, here I have some code I've inherited with a bunch of regular expressions in it, but it's pretty poorly documented. Let's ask Copilot what they do. Oh, looks like we have validation for email addresses, phone numbers, and strong passwords. Makes sense. But let's ask for help to make this code a bit more readable for the next person. I'll type, make this code more readable. Not bad. But I'd like some more, so let's ask Copilot to separate out the validation functions and add more comments. Okay, great, that's much better. The code is now in separate functions with the comments, and the variables have much more meaningful names. This is going to be a lot easier to maintain going forward, so let's bring it over. Now let's take a look at some code that isn't working and see if Copilot can help me figure out why. I'll ask Copilot to propose a fix for the bugs in my code. Now, Copilot's determined by looking at my comment and comparing it to the code that I was treating the data as comma separated in my code, but in my comment I was saying it was space separated. It's also noticed from the comment that I was returning the values in a different order, and it's adding some error checking for me that it typically sees with this type of code. Okay, so let's bring this code over and run it. And yep, that works. Brilliant. While we're here, let's ask Copilot to create us some unit tests so we don't accidentally break this code again. Perfect. Copilot's analysing the code paths we take in our code and using the context from the comment to generate a set of unit tests for the branches of logic it sees. It's a great start for us, so we could take this, copy it over into a test function, and then build that out over time. But let me show you one last thing. With chat functionality right in your editor, it's so much easier to stay focused and on task. You can ask for help about coding right where you are. You can even have a conversation with Copilot to learn more. Let's ask for an example here. However, we're deliberately constraining the prompt to ensure we only have questions that we detect has an intent around programming. If we stray outside of this, it will politely decline.
It not only, in the demo, it shows the interaction in Spanish. Martin is from Ireland, but it actually also speaks German, Spanish, Brazilian Portuguese, or even Mandarin. And so, you are all developers, I think, or students, and there's many students out there that not only want to build software, they actually want to learn while building software. Copilot X enables this. And you've likely seen, the memes about the 10x developer on the internet. It's a common argument, between people, and many have claimed the 10x developer. And we think actually the discussion doesn't really matter because Copilot will redefine what the 10x developer is. And it's not about you striving to be a 10x developer. It's that you all deserve to be 10 times more productive. So you can use the time that you have during your day. You can use your most creative ideas. You can implement your most creative ideas to implement the next big thing of tomorrow. So this was the end of my talk. Thank you so much.